Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations on your appointment. And again, thank you for your generosity with time, particularly for those of us who are at the end of the line of questioners. Madam Chair, you have stressed in your written and in your verbal testimony here today the Fed's statutory mandate of maximum employment. Should the objective of U.S. fiscal policy also be to maximize employment?
Fiscal policy has many different objectives. It affects the economy in a whole variety of different ways, and so I wouldn't have stated that that's the main goal of fiscal policy, but it is a goal that fiscal policy should take into account.
Last week, as you know, the Congressional Budget Office issued this report, and that report projected that the President's health care law, Obamacare, will reduce the size of the U.S. labor force by 2.5 million full-time equivalent workers over the next decade. That's about triple what the CBO originally projected after the Congress passed Obamacare 3 years ago or 4 years ago. In commenting on that report, CBO Director Elmendorf testified that the act creates a disincentive for people to work. And it does this against a backdrop where the labor force participation rate is already the lowest that it's been in 35 years. The White House responded to this bad news by claiming that 2.5 million Americans leaving the workforce was actually a good thing, saying that these people would no longer be, quote, trapped in a job, unquote. My question to you is, I think, a pretty straightforward one. Is a shrinking workforce a positive or a negative development for the economy?
So it has different effects. I don't think there's a simple answer to that question. In the CBO analysis that they focused on, this not being a matter of creating unemployment, but of people withdrawing from the labor force, and there are some good and bad aspects to that.
Well, let me ask you the question this way. It's the statutory mandate of the Fed to maximize employment. So why would it be a complex question? Why shouldn't be the goal of U.S. fiscal policy be equally dedicated to maximizing employment, and shouldn't this concern all of us?
Well, I think the CBO recognized when they produced this analysis that the effects of this act are extremely complex. And while it has effects on labor supply, the act also may have effect, for example, on the growth of healthcare costs and a number of different impacts on the growth of the economy over time that go in different directions.
And Madam Chair, will a declining labor force, how would that impact deficits?
I'm not sure. It's not.
Okay. Let me move on to a different subject. Just as an economist and also as Fed Chair, as you assess the fiscal health of the nation, which is a more meaningful statistic for you, the total debt figure or the ratio of debt to gross domestic product, and why would you choose one or the other?
Well, I would look at the debt to GDP ratio, both currently and its projected path over time under assumptions that current policies continue. I think you can't assess the debt of an economy and how, if you were looking at the debt of a household, you would need to assess it to know what the household's income is, what's a bearable or serviceable level of debt given the income of that household or the economy. What's important here is that according to any projection, particularly the CBO's, over a long horizon, the U.S. debt is unsustainable relative to GDP.
I appreciate your comment and your testimony there. I've introduced legislation that will replace the existing debt ceiling law with a new debt ceiling that ties debt to it ties the new ceiling to a declining debt to GDP ratio, so I appreciate the testimony. One final question. I often hear the argument that quantitative easing effectively enables our fiscal deficits by lowering the cost of borrowing for the government and by artificially fueling the market for U.S. Treasuries. Is there a reason to be concerned that QE crosses the line from monetary to fiscal policy because it implicitly finances government?
Not in my opinion. I believe the Fed is focused on its mandate that was given to it by Congress, namely maximum sustainable employment and price stability, and I think you should hold us accountable to meeting those goals.
Thank you. I yield back
Time
to
of the gentleman has expired. The chair now